Snatch Intro.
The snatch is the quintessential kettlebell lift. The snatch is an explosive, quick lift that starts with a hip hinge, translating into a hip drive and swing, followed by a flipping of the kettlebell overhead and subsequent drop out, and finally back to the hip hinge to set up for another repetition. We have broken the snatch movement into a number of phases to make it easier to learn.
Step 1. Float swing.
This exercise alternates between shoulder height swing and float swing. When doing the float swing, your elbow is bent slightly and the kettlebell passes closer to the body, continuing up beyond the top of your head. Both movements use the same powerful hip drive, pushing your heels into the floor, bringing you back to an upright position. When you're on the float swing phase, the idea is to lead with the elbow up into a high bent position, and you want to create some hang time just above head level. As you do this, angle your thumb slightly so that it points toward the opposite side foot. Track the movement of the kettlebell with your other hand. Try to minimize tension in the upper body by relaxing at the peak. Focus on keeping a consistent controlled backswing to the imaginary point on the floor behind you. Practice these swings for a few weeks until the motion is smooth and you feel in complete control of the kettlebell.
Step 2. Float swing to lockout.
Once you have mastered the float swing combo, it's time to introduce the punch through and overhead lockout. Start with the swing to float swing, and on the third swing, do a float swing, but this time quickly thrust your open hand toward the ceiling just before the kettlebell hangs or stalls at the forehead level. The idea is to explosively thrust your hand skyward and deep into the handle. When the kettlebell is overhead, locked out your elbow. In the locked out position, your palm should be facing forward, your elbow locked out, and your shoulder down and away from the ear. The first few times you try this, the kettlebell may bang into your forearm, but when done properly there is little or no impact on the back of the arm because your hand quickly speeds through the handle before the kettlebell circumvents the wrist. Don't flick the kettlebell around your wrist or try to control the kettlebell by gripping the handle. Instead, aggressively punch your hand skyward as you thrust it deeply into the handle. After holding the kettlebell overhead briefly, catch the kettlebell into the rack position and prepare for the next combo round. To achieve flow and momentum, use both arms, with one arm tracking the other. This combination of swings is fantastic for endurance. It's a great full body workout on its own.
Step 3. Float swing lockout to racked position.
After practicing the previous step, it's time to move to the next phase. Start with a float swing, followed by a float swing with punch through and lockout, then catching the kettlebell in the rack position. Do a few repetitions of this, then remove the additional float swing and go straight into a punch through and lockout. This is known as the half snatch. You should be able to get sufficient hip drive to go straight into the lockout. When pausing in the lockout phase, be sure that 1. Your wrist is straight. 2. The handle is deep and diagonally across the hand. 3. Your palm is facing forward. 4. Your arm is vertical. 5. Your elbow is completely locked out. 6. Your shoulder is settled away from your ear. Once you feel confident in performing the half snatch, you can progress to the dropout.
Step 4. The dropout without kettlebell.
Doing a dropout can be a little tricky, so we're going to practice the moves without a kettlebell first. Stand upright in the typical swing stance, your hand overhead, palm facing forward. Bend your elbow slightly, rotating your hand, turning your little finger forward, dropping your hand down the front of your body. Your palm should be toward your face as your hand passes by. As your hand reaches hip level, rotate your hand back in the other direction with your thumb pointing behind you. Hip level is the point that you catch the kettlebell handle into the OK grip. The idea is to trace a gentle arc in front of your body, then steer the kettlebell past your hips and between your legs, bending at the hips and knees to absorb the kettlebell momentum. From the lower position, when the kettlebell is on the return swing, your body is loaded to hip thrust and bring the kettlebell back up. It's really important to practice this exercise without the kettlebell at first, since the movement is quite complicated and doing it incorrectly may result in jerky movements, resulting in injury. The movement is all about timing, so you avoid slackness in the arm that may jolt the joints of the upper body. The idea is to steer the momentum of the kettlebell down and behind by way of a gentle arc.
Step 5. The dropout with kettlebell.
Next, we will practice the dropout portion of the snatch by using a simple push press to raise the kettlebell into place. From overhead, start the dropout by bending your elbow slightly as you rotate your little finger forward. As the kettlebell drops, bend at the knees as you hinge back into the hips and the heels. Catch the handle using the OK grip. Then rotate the kettlebell so that your thumb points backwards, steering the kettlebell between the upper part of your legs. Absorb the momentum into the hips and legs. Dissipate the energy by gently swinging it out. Continue to practice the half snatch and the dropout technique separately. When you have developed your confidence and timing with these movements, proceed to the full snatch.
Step 6. Full snatch.
Once you feel the previous drills are seamless, it is time to move to the full snatch. Start with a few pre-swings to get momentum. Inhale, swing back, and then drive your heels into the floor. Steer the kettlebell up along the front of your body, watching the kettlebell as it moves. Keep your elbow high and slightly bent, and just before the kettlebell loses speed, thrust your hand deep into the handle and punch straight up. Be confident, explosive, and follow the basic cues. Your arms should now be vertical, locked out, and your palm facing forward with the kettlebell overhead. Settle your shoulder away from your ear. For the dropout, put the weight in your heels and then turn your little finger forward as you look up and bend your elbow. Steer the kettlebell down, close to your body. Open your chest by pulling shoulders back, look at your focal point. As your wrist passes your inseam, quickly straighten your elbow as you bend at the knees. Catch the kettlebell momentum back into the hip hinge. Inhale and drive heels down into the floor and explosively repeat another snatch.